All right. So, question one. Why are arrays considered to be fast and memory inefficient, while linked lists are considered to be slow and memory efficient? Look at that. So, we have, can I move this? Okay. So arrays are implemented using contiguous memory. So that is memory in a row. So the position of a particular, well, let's say, so the memory address of a particular bucket of the array can be calculated. This makes them fast. Linked lists are implemented in such a way that was Mr. Gonzalez, by the way. Linked lists are implemented in such a way that only a single node that a single node knows about only his neighbor. So getting to a particular bucket requires us to start at the beginning of the list and then traverse it, making it slow. All right. So that's why arrays are fast, linked lists are slow. Now, arrays are memory inefficient because they are implemented with contiguous memory, and therefore need to have all of their memory allocated at the beginning, which means we need to know the maximum number of elements we will store. Linked lists are memory efficient since we can start with an empty list and then add / remove elements as we need them. All right, so that makes some sense? So something along those lines, proving that you understand the difference between contiguous memory with arrays and non-contiguous memory with linked lists. All right, so that is one. Number two, create a class for representing a student object. A student has a name, email, and GPA. Make sure to include all the necessary constructors and getters, setters, blah, blah, blah. All right, I'm going to implement that like in here. We'll call this guy CSC518 midterm.java. I'll just put it inside of a class here so I can just have all of our code inside this class. All right, so we're doing this thing called student, public class student. And a student has a name, a GPA, and a email. So name would be string, email would be string, GPA would probably be a double or a float. So we'll have a private string name, private string email, private double GPA. Then we'll have a constructor for this guy. Say this dot name is equal to name. This dot email is equal to email. This dot GPA is equal to GPA. Now, since these guys are private, we need to give ourselves at least some getters, but I'll just do getters and setters for all of these. So we'll have a public string get name. We've got to return this dot name. We'll have a public string get email. We've got to return this dot email. We'll have a public double get GPA. Just got to return this dot GPA. Then we can go ahead and have setters. If you didn't write setters, that's fine. But we'll say public void set name. This guy takes the string name as a parameter. This dot name equals whatever name was passed in. Public void set email. Take the string as a parameter. This dot email is equal to email. Public void set GPA. This guy will take in a double GPA just to give you a little idea on how, like, why you might want a setter like this. Let's assume that you don't want to let them set a GPA to something less than 0. So you might say if GPA is greater than or equal to 0, then we'll say this dot GPA is equal to whatever GPA they passed in. Otherwise, we won't set it. So that gives you some control over setting it. Otherwise, if you just say, I'm going to make all my fields private, and then just give myself direct read and write access to them anyways, you might as well have made them public. But I made them private, and then we had setters and getters for those guys. All right, questions about this? Okay, so that's question 2. Question 3, convert this number 1101100 from binary to hex. So this is 1101100. Yep. All right, we're going binary to hex. We'll do it the long way first, where we'll first convert this binary number to decimal, and then we'll do decimal to hexadecimal. So that's both of our patterns, right? So this is the ones place, the twos place, 4s, 8s, 16s, 32s, 64s, 128s. So this is 128 times 1 plus 64 times 1 plus 0 times 32 plus 16 times 1 plus 8 times 1 plus 4 times 1 plus 0 times 2 plus 0 times 1. So this is 220. So that binary number is 220 decimal. Then we divide 220 decimal by 16. That gives me 13. 16 times 13 is 208. So that's a remainder of 12. 16 divided by, or 13 divided by 16 is 0, remainder 13. And then we convert these. So this is an A is a 10, an 11 is a B, a 12 is a C, a 13 is a D. So this is a D. See? We read it from bottom up. So that is the hexadecimal answer, DC. Now, if you wanted to take the shortcut, you divide your binary number into nibbles, so chunks of 4. This first one is decimal 13. The second one is decimal 12. D. All right, so questions on that one? All right, no. Next one. Write a method takes a string as a parameter, returns the number of spaces contained in that string. Okay. Takes a string as a parameter, returns the number of spaces contained in that string. Write a second class down here. I'll say public class midterm. So, well, I can make it public, it doesn't matter. So public int count spaces takes a string as a parameter. The parameter returns the number of spaces contained in the string. So I'm going to need a variable. I'm going to remember how many spaces I've run into. So I'll create a memory location to count. I'm going to go through each element of S for int I is equal to 0. I is less than S dot length, I plus plus. Each time through, I'll ask the question if the current character I'm looking at is equal to a space, then I want to count it. So if S dot char at I is equivalent to a space, then count plus plus. In the end, I'll return count. So method named count spaces takes a string as a parameter. It's going to return the number of spaces that were in that string. I'll start off with a variable that remembers 0 spaces. I'll go through every element of S. Each time through, I'll ask the question, am I looking at a space? If the answer is yes, I'll increment count. Otherwise, just loop on to the next one over and over and over and over again. As soon as I fall out of that loop, I return the current value of count. All right, questions on that one? Hey. What is the this keyword and why do we need it? Okay, so let's go back into here. That's number 5. So this keyword is how an object refers to itself from within itself. We need this because as an object is being instantiated, it does not have access to the external variable that is being used while creating the object. So we need an internal way to refer to ourselves in the event we need to specify scoping rules. You can say, like, for example, our student has a name, and it makes sense for the constructor to also take a parameter named name. So this keyword lets us have both a field and a local parameter named name, and we can differentiate them. Using the keyword. And we kind of saw that out here. I have a field name. My constructor takes in a parameter name. It makes sense to name this variable name because I'm reading in a name. It makes sense to name this field name because that's the kind of information it stores. But when I set those guys equal to each other, if I just say name is equal to name here, it's setting this parameter equal to itself. I really want to set this particular field, that is the field owned by this instance of student, equal to the name that was passed in. That is this dot name. All right, questions on that one?
So is that what they call shadowing right there? When you have a parameter that's the same name as one of the object attributes?
Well, shadowing refers to having a variable that I guess, hides a more global scope of the same variable. It doesn't necessarily mean a field of an object. It deals with scopes within scopes within scopes. So you could have, for instance, let's see, the best way to show it would be like in a nested class, but let me just do a fake thing here. So let me say int I is equal to 5, and then for int I is equal to 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus. Now, this won't actually work in Java. Java treats the environment created by for loops a little differently, but let's just assume it did for a second. This variable I shadows this variable I because it's a more local scope of the same variable. So this loop here would print out 0 through 9, and then it would print out a 5, presumably, when it left that scope, when the scope died, and it fell back out and returned to that variable I was no longer shadowed by it. So saying a variable is shadowed doesn't explicitly mean it's related to the fields of an object. It means that a more local scope is present, which shadows a more global scope. All right. What are the Singleton and Observer design patterns, and why do we need them? 6. So we have 2 different questions here, Singleton and Observer. Singleton design pattern says it's a good idea to store information that needs to be accessible by, you could say, more than 1 or more than 2 classes. Either one kind of is viable. We'll just say more than 2 classes in a single global place. Why do we need it? We need this so that we can conveniently share data between multiple parts of an application. So that's Singleton. Observer says it's a good idea to be productive while we are waiting for some event to occur. And get notified when it finally occurs. So you might say this with an example. You know, we need non-blocking, which is asynchronous, communication. Well, non-blocking, asynchronous. Such that we can set up a lookout and let the program continue, and then be alerted later on when/if we need to deal with an event. But really, we need this so our applications feel like they are alive and not locked up while waiting for something to occur. Something along those lines. All right. Questions on that one? Purpose of the custom array adapter. So for starters, an array adapter is used to adapt an object to a XML layout file in our world for a list view, even though it can be used for other things. The default array adapter works for a string and a single text view layout. If we have a more complex object type or a more complex layout, we need to override the array adapter class to provide logic for dealing with our custom object type and how its fields map to use on our custom layout. So something along those lines. Questions on that one? All right. Write an method that takes an array of ints as a parameter and reverses that array in place. Has to say that your method does not return a value, but rather updates the existing array to be reversed, to be the reverse of itself. Okay. All right. Oops, those aren't curly braces. There we go. All right, so we have a method called reverse array. It's going to return nothing. It takes in an integer array as a parameter, and it's going to make this array the reverse of itself. Now, you can try to play tricky math games and stuff with this to do it all at the same time, but I'm going to give it to you in a more straightforward way. So I'm going to create an int array called temp. I'm going to say this is a new int array that is the exact same size as AR. All right, so now I have an empty array that's the exact same size as AR is. Now, I want to walk through every element of AR from the end to the beginning and copy it into the beginning to the end of temp. So I need to keep track of two counters. You can actually do this all inside of a single for loop, or you can separate them. I'll put it all inside one, and I'll just show you how to separate it because it's more just a convenient syntax. So I could say int temp pause starts off at 0, and AR pause starts off at AR.length -1. So this is the last legal bucket of AR. This is the first legal bucket of temp. I'm going to keep going as long as I can say temp pause is less than temp.length. Or I can keep going as long as AR pause is greater than or equal to 0. And then I'm going to say temp pause plus plus AR pause minus minus. So I have two separate counters here. I have one counter that's keeping track of where I am inside of temp. It's going to start at bucket 0, then go to bucket 1, then go to bucket 2, then go to bucket 3. I have a separate counter called AR pause that's going to start at the last legal position in AR and work itself backwards towards bucket 0. See how temp pause goes up, AR pause goes down. Okay, now technically for loops do allow you to define more than one parameter here, more than one variable, and they also allow you to change more than one variable. If you don't like that, you can always put that variable on the outside. And then inside your code, make sure you make the adjustment to that second counter if you're going to make changes to it. So these are both the same. It's just convenient to have everything sucked into the single scope of the for loop. So what am I going to do? I'm going to say temp at bucket temp pause is equal to AR at bucket AR pause. So I'm copying AR into temp in reverse. So when this is all said and done, temp will be the reverse version of AR. All right, so now I'm going to show you what a lot of a mistake that is commonly made. A lot of people at this point would just say, oh, now I'm just going to set AR equal to temp, and we're good. So I built a brand new array, which is a pointer into memory. I filled it up with AR in reverse, and I just set AR to point to the same place temp points to. All right, now let me show you why this does not work. We're going to draw a picture here. So we're going to say that AR is at memory address 100. And I'm going to say that temp is memory address 500. And we'll say inside of our program, we have something called myArray or something like that. And this guy points here. And then we have a line of code somewhere that says like reverse array myArray. And this guy is going to have a variable called AR. MyArray is getting passed in for AR. So these two dudes both point to the same place. All right. So that's what's happening when we first call our reverse array, passing it whatever the name of our array was from main or something. It gets passed into reverse array, which takes a single input called AR. So AR and myArray both point to the same place in memory. Very first thing I do inside of reverse array is I create a brand new array called temp. And this gives me new memory. So that's this guy right here. Okay, so now what we did is we went through and we filled up temp. We filled up this guy right here with all the elements that were in AR backwards, right? So temp is filled up with all of the elements of AR backwards. Then what do I do? At the end, I say set AR equal to temp. AR is a variable. Temp is a variable. What kind of value does temp hold? Any takers?
Is it pointing to a memory space?
Yeah, so it holds a memory address. Okay, so the correct answer is it holds a memory address. It does not hold an array. It points to an array, but it doesn't hold an array. So when I do this, when I say AR is equal to temp, I'm saying that. So let me ask you something then. Did this memory ever change? Never touched, was it?
Nope.
So now this function ends, and what happens? My local variable called temp, which was a local variable of reverse array, gets garbage collected because it lived and died with this function. So this guy is gone. AR was also a local variable of that. So he's gone. And I basically just wasted my time. So what we actually need to do here, we need to make that red again, it's very important. What we actually need to do here is copy the contents back over. So now that temp holds my array in reverse, now I can go ahead and say parent I is equal to 0, I is less than temp.length, I plus plus, AR at bucket I is equal to temp at bucket I. So that will go back and overwrite everything in AR with all my elements of temp, which temp holds the reverse version of AR. That makes sense? So in that case, my original memory now is also changed. The address is the same, but the stuff at that address has now been modified. So when this method ends, these guys get cleaned up, but my array points to some altered data. Now, what some of you may have done, I haven't looked at the test yet because they weren't due until the beginning of class, but what some of you may have tried to do, which is fine, you may have tried to kind of figure out like the midpoint math, where you actually only needed to go to the middle of the array. And so you started at the beginning and you started at the end, and you just kept swapping those positions and moving towards each other. And then as soon as they passed each other, you were done. You can do that. It'll work. It'll give you one loop instead of two. But then you have to sit there and figure out, well, did I go too far? Did I not go far enough? Blah, blah, blah. Where this is pretty cut and dry.
That's what I did. I'm not sure if I set it up correctly, but which one is actually more efficient? Is it better to have two loops like this or the midpoint way?
Well, the midpoint one's probably more efficient. Here, I'll write the midpoint one real quick. I'll try to write the midpoint one real quick. I'm firing on about half a cylinder. So maybe we have like an int temp that we use for the swapping. Let's just do int begin is equal to 0, int end is equal to AR dot length minus 1, last equal position, while begin is less than end. Temp is equal to AR at position begin. AR position begin is equal to AR position end. AR position end is equal to temp begin plus plus and minus minus. Something along those lines. So if we had an array, I'll just draw the picture real quick. Start with an odd number, and then we'll test it for even numbers. So here's my array. I don't like the position of that guy, so I can't hit my, there we go. This is AR. And let's assume this is currently 5, 1, 3, 2, 7. So I have begin. Here, I'll just give you the indexes here. That's bucket 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the values that live in those buckets. We set begin to point at bucket 0. We set end to point at bucket length minus 1, like this. Then I have another variable called temp that I use for swapping. So I say, while begin is less than end. Is 0 less than 4? It is. So what do? I'm going to set temp equal to AR at bucket begin. So that's going to be 5. So temp's going to be equal to 5. Then I'm going to overwrite AR at bucket begin with AR at bucket end. I'll overwrite this 5 with this 7. Then I'm going to overwrite the 7. Let me just do something here real quick. That's the original state, so we don't forget. So then I'll overwrite the end with temp. That's what this guy does right here. And temp holds a 5. Then I increment begin, decrement end. So begin goes to here, end goes to here. Is begin less than end? Yes, it is. So we're going to set temp equal to bucket begin, which is 1. We'll set bucket begin equal to bucket end, which is 3. Then we'll set bucket end equal to temp, which is 1. Then we'll decrement or increment. Then we'll decrement. Oh, hold on. I'm changing my indexes. Give me a moment. Okay, so I need to swap these guys. So this became a 1. Then a 1 became a 2. Then a 2 became a 1. Then we decremented. Is begin less than end? Nope, they're the same, so we're done. And there's my array in reverse. So did you do it something along those lines? Or did you try to get something, do something fancier?
Sure were like shaving wieners and dodging knife
So questions on any of that? Based on your question, which is more efficient, this is probably more efficient. I mean, it's not hard to write, but in order to be confident that you did all the flipping, you kind of had to draw the picture, where this one's, you know, pretty brute forced. Create a new container, filled up with the original in reverse, copy over the original with my reverse version of itself.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident I might have messed that up.
Yeah, so that's a 0.
Sick.
But that kind of goes to the point where, I mean, not that this is hard, and chances are if you messed it up, you know, you just did it, you went one too far, not far enough, or probably the bigger risk here is maybe your Boolean expression is junk, and you end up having an infinite loop or something like that. You know, if you do something like this by accident, n++, now they're both just tracking each other, so now it's an infinite loop. So that kind of stuff you can run into. Oh, actually, it'll just crash before it's an infinite loop. But regardless, you know, this is more mathematically interesting, but probably more error prone unless you draw the picture. Where on an exam, this is just brute force. I'm just going to make this work and be confident in it and move on with life. And the bottom line is this kind of goes back to the first question on the exam. Arrays are already slow. So you're already, you know, why try to make it overly efficient if you're using an array is the punchline. You've already kind of given up on this idea that, well, arrays are already memory inefficient and they're already fast. So given that they're memory inefficient, you're not gaining anything by trying to be extra efficient here. I'm already using some memory, why not use more memory? Now, you could make the argument if your array that you're reversing is gigantic, now I'm using twice as much memory temporarily as I was using before to do the reversal. Where this solution up here does not create new memory, it just does everything with the existing memory. You could probably make an argument either way. All right. Number Number 9, assume you have access to a linked list of integers. Similar to what we wrote in class, write a method that takes a linked list as a parameter and removes the odd numbers from that list. You may assume you have access to all of this crap. Okay. This is a fun, interesting problem. All right, so we have this. We have a linked list called LL, and our job is to remove all of the odds from that. Now I'm gonna go about this in the most straightforward way, and then we'll talk about why that's a problem. So I'm gonna go through every element of my linked list. So I'll say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than LL dot what I call it get count, I plus plus. All right, so LL dot get count tells me the number of elements that are in that linked list. Then I'll ask myself, is the current element odd? If LL dot get at index I, and we can assume that gives me the payload, or if you think that gives you the node, you can then say dot get payload, whatever makes you happy. But we'll just assume it gives me the actual int. So if LL dot get at index when modded by 2 is equal to a 1, that means it's odd, right? And if it's odd, what do I want to do? Let's say, should I give you a remove at index? Remove at index. Okay, so that might be the most straightforward way of going about it. That happens to be wrong. To remove odds, we're going to go through every element of the linked list. For each element, we're going to say, are you odd? If you are, we're going to remove you. Why is this a problem?
You're going to orphan the nodes that are past the one that you removed.
Orphan the nodes that are past the one I removed.
Yeah, aren't you? If you remove, I don't know, if you're removing the node at the index, aren't you removing the pointer to the other nodes down the road?
Well, I mean, when we wrote remove at index, when it was done, we removed bucket 3, for example, but we left the list intact, didn't we?
I can't remember.
I'm sure we did. Yeah, we were doing surgery. We were removing an element but keeping our list intact when all was said and done. So we're not orphaning them, but you're along the right lines here. What's the problem with this? When I remove an element from a list, what happens to that list count?
Decrements?
It goes down by 1, right? If I remove something from a list, it goes down by 1. Right now, my Boolean expression is operating off of the number of elements that are currently in that list. If as I go through here, I'm randomly ripping stuff away from the list, this guy's a moving target. I'm going to start skipping numbers. So if I just remove bucket 2, for example, the next time through, I'm going to check bucket 3. But what I actually want to do is I want to check bucket 2. Because what used to be bucket 3 is now bucket 2 because I just removed the old bucket 2. I took something off the list. Does that make sense? So whenever I actually remove something here, my list is 1 smaller. Draw a picture of this. Pretty important concept here. Can I hide this? Oh, can't hide it there. I never use that button. All right. That should be enough. Didn't even check. Is everybody actually at class? Oh, look, there's everybody. Wasn't Maddie late? We had a quiz.
I was definitely here on time.
Lion?
No. Ask Mr. Gonzalez.
He's not going to lie for you.
Well, ask him. He'll tell you the truth.
Me and him have been sitting here coughing all day. He coughed.
I've been in bed all day, too.
You're still sick?
Yep.
Ah, what'd you get for going to Guatemala? All right.
Hey, Mike, on the mod math to check if it's odd or even, should be mod 0 for an even number.
I'm asking if it's an odd number.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so when I divide by 2, it has a remainder of 1.
No, I understand. It's literally, I thought we were looking for even numbers.
Well,
so it's got to be 1.
We're going to come back to that in a few minutes because that's the solution I'm going to suggest. I'm going to show you, kind of similar to what we just did this last time. I'm going to show you how you could have made this work, and then I'm going to show you the brute force. Look, if you just want it to work, you don't want to screw around with this like extra logic. Just do it this way. And that goes along with what you're saying. Instead of removing odds, I'm going to keep evens and then empty out the whole list and then copy my evens back over. Let me show you why our current solution is a problem here first. So I'll just throw some numbers in here. We'll make this guy another odd. Okay. Oh, click. All right, so we'll put the final one that points out to nowhere. So that's what our linked list currently looks like. We're going to have a counter. I'll just, even though we're internally doing this, it's not actually a pointer, it's an index, but there's our variable I that's looking at these different things. So right off the bat, I'm looking at bucket I. Is this guy odd? He is. So what am I going to do? I'm going to remove this bucket. Well, we already have a function that does this. So what's remove going to ultimately do? It's going to do this. It's going to take this guy away. It's going to have head point to the new front of the list. Now, I was not a pointer. Remember, I is an index. So right now, I is index 0, which still is, this is bucket 0 now. So now we spin back up in our loop. We jump to here. We never even checked this node because the next time through, I becomes 1. Started off at 0, goes the 1 the next time through. All because I remove something in the middle. So the next time through, I look at bucket 1. This used to be bucket 1. Now this is bucket 1 because I removed bucket 0. That makes sense? So if I go ahead and make this guy arbitrarily an odd number, and we do this, I'll remove this odd. Spin back through my loop, increment I. I'll remove this odd. spin back through my loop, increment I, and now I'm done. I actually left 2 odds in that list because I didn't even check them. See how that's working? As I changed how many elements were in my list, I kept moving. I started off at 0, then it went to 1, then it went to 2, so on and so forth. But the count of my list kept going down. It went from 4 to 3, then from 3 to 2. Now I can fix this by just saying I minus minus in there. Anytime I actually remove something, I can go ahead and just say, okay, I need to recheck this particular bucket because I just took it away. Because now there's going to be a new dude in this position. Does that make sense? So this solution will work. Whenever I remove, you're basically saying, I'm going to redo my check on this bucket. Subtract 1 from it, which will then be followed by adding 1 from it, which will make you check the exact same bucket again.
If it's at the head or it's at the very first in the list and you subtract from it first, though, will it? What happens if you're taking out the first one and you move I to just to go to I0 or?
Well, yeah. So I start off at 0, right? 0
Yep.
becomes -1. A -1 becomes a 0.
Okay, so I could be a negative number.
For a moment, you wouldn't want to try to get at bucket -1.
Okay.
But I's only a -1 for a second here. Then we hit the end of the for loop, and it goes right back to 0.
Okay.
Yeah, the only reason I'm doing this I minus minus is to counterbalance what I'm about to do there. All because I just cut something off my list. Make sense? So I'm kind of like legitimately rolling with the punches as I start knocking stuff off the list. Now, the way I would solve this more directly, so you don't have to worry about the list changing in size, let's see, remove odds 2. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to create a new linked list. Be an empty linked list. And then I'm going to go through my entire original linked list. Where I is equal to 0, I is less than ll.getCount, I plus plus. And then I'll ask the question, if ll.getAtIndex I, when modded by 2, is even, I'm going to keep it. So I didn't actually remove anything. I just got the thing that was at the index and I tacked it onto the end of temp. All right, so temp is being built up with all of my even numbers, all of my not odd numbers. So once I get through this for loop, temp should have all of my not odd numbers in there. Then I'm going to say ll.removeAll. Told you there was a function called removeAll that just dumps everything from ll. And then I'll say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than temp.getCount, I plus plus, ll.addEnd, temp.getAtIndex I. So that will solve the problem. Brand new linked list. Go through my original linked list. Every single time I find an even number 1, I'll go ahead and just tack that guy onto the end of temp. So temp is going to become a collection of all the evens from LL. Then, once I have all my evens, I'll just go ahead and just dump everything from LL. So now LL is empty. Then I go back through temp and just add everything to LL. So now LL contains only the even numbers that it originally had. which effectively means all the odds are gone. Make sense? So either one of those would have been a reasonable enough solution. Generally speaking, I would say beginning programmers or less experienced programmers should take approaches similar to this. Don't worry about the efficiency of your solution initially. Get a correct solution first. Then, if you have concerns about its efficiency, then you can go back through and look at how can you tweak it to make it efficient. A more advanced programmer might say, a more experienced programmer might say, well, this really wasn't a big deal. So I can go ahead and say, when I remove something, I need to go and recheck that same bucket again. So I need to do this little counterbalance thing. But this is almost a little math tricky thing because you're kind of saying, I recognize that I just changed the count. And this is the known dangerous thing with linked data structures. When you start removing stuff, I mean, we're using built-in functions, so we're presuming that, you know, whoever wrote the add front, add end, added index, remove front, remove end, remove an index, that those are written correctly. That if I remove from bucket 3, my list has everything it used to have, except bucket 3 that used to be there is now gone, so there's a new bucket 3. All right, questions about that one? All right. Last one. Linked list. Same thing as before. Random method takes a linked list as a parameter and duplicates the elements in the list. So each element should be, so if the list was 357, it should become 335577. So we can do a pretty similar approach to this one. Call this dup list. I'll go ahead and I'll do it the long-winded way first. Well, I'll create a brand new list. Ay, ay, ay. I equals 0, I is less than ll.getCount, I plus plus. So each time through, I'm going to say temp.add end, ll.get at index I. And then I'll just do that a second time. So for each one element in LL, I'll tack that same element on twice to temp. Then ll.remove all. And I will say LL, well, then I'll have another loop for it. I is equal to 0. I is less than temp.getCount. I plus plus. I'm going to copy the contents of temp into LL. ll.addEnd temp.get at index I. Like that. New linked list. Go through all the elements of LL. For each of those elements, add that same element twice to temp. Then dump everything out of LL. Go through everything that's in temp, which should have everything duplicated once. Add them all to the end of LL, which was just emptied. So LL should now be the duplicate of itself. All right, so that's one way you could write that. Another way is, instead of doing a temporary list, we just say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than ll.getCount, I plus plus, and we'll go ahead and say ll.add at index, ll, well, you have to decide whether it's the index first or not. So I'm going to say it's the index first. I'll say I, ll dot get at index I, and I plus plus. So this is going to go through every element of LL. Each time through, I'm going to add another element in LL. Where at bucket I, the current bucket we're at, what element am I adding? I'm adding another copy of the current element I'm looking at. But then I need to increment I, even though I increment it again in a second, because I just grew the length of my list. So I need to jump ahead so I don't duplicate the same value another time. So this will do it as well. So you can say you like this better because it's shorter, but it does require you to kind of do the math magic, as opposed to this guy being much more, straightforward and just saying, I'm going to just knock this out and get it correct. All right, questions about that? And was there any other questions, or was that it? That was it.
Is this where we ask for pity?
Depends. How bad was it?
Well, I'm pretty sure I bombed those last two questions for sure.
Well, like funny bombed or left them blank bombed?
Probably funny bomb. No, I didn't leave them blank. So.
Yeah, so I'll find that entertaining. Remember, I have the policy that if you do better in your final exam than you did in the midterm, I'll replace your midterm exam score with your final exam score. So if you got a 0 in this one and you come back and get 100 in the last one, you'll end up with 100 on this one and on the last one. So do that. All right, so let me put this up on. So that should be code for you to work with. I didn't run it, but I'm sure it's perfect. Okay, so first let me make sure there's a way for me to actually pause the recording, and then somebody has to remind me to start it back up. Yeah, so I'm going to pause the recording. Let's come back in about 10 minutes, and we'll solve the homework assignment, and then we'll go from there. So I'll see you at, 7:14, so 7:25, we'll come back. All right, resume recording. All right, everybody can hear me again?
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's look at the homework. What was the homework? Please tell me it was easy. Nobody's telling me it was here.
No, it wasn't. No.
All right, well, let me look at the. See what I assigned you. Update your app to allow the user to select an airport, which will take them to a new page, and will then show a list of all cities for which that airport has direct flights. So I've already given you a code, network thread for getting a list of direct flights from Milwaukee. Adapt that for direct flights to whatever the user selects and load that into a list view. Oh, okay. So let's get this guy open. Can I hide this so it's not a problem? Is it safe? It seems like it might be safe. Oh, of course there's updates. There's always updates in this stupid thing. All right. Let me run this and see where we left off. All right, so here's our airport list. It takes a little bit for it to, so I type in MKE and say filter. There's that. So the idea is if I click on this, it should take me to a screen that shows me the airports for Milwaukee. And similarly for whatever other airport. All right. Okay. So let's look at my network thread here. All right, so I've already given you code that inserts Milwaukee in this and takes us to that page. It hits it gets all the information. And here's giving you those pieces of information. And what did it look like? Just a bunch of strings, right? Yeah. And you didn't have to click on the stuff. You just had to show the list of those flights. Okay. So let's go ahead and get our second screen set up so that whenever we click on one of the things, it takes us there. So we'll use our on-click listener dealy flippy. So let's call this guy airport detail activity. It sounds reasonable enough. So we'll say new activity, empty activity. Yeah, can't see it all. There we go. Airport detail activity. And we'll have it generate the layout file, blah, 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 hit finish. Okay, and then let me get my let's see, what is it? This guy. I'm going to throw my linear layout in here. Vertical one. And then for right now, I'll just throw a text view just to prove that we've gotten in here. Is something funny? It should be quiet. Mr. Gonzalez is throwing knives over on the other side of the room. Try not to get too aggravated. Let's see, this is our airport detail screen, right? So I'm going to go ahead and have our, when we click on one of the things, have at least launch the screen just to show us that we can get there. All right, so we can go into our.
Is this the screen that's going to have all of the direct flights?
Yep, this will ultimately have a list of direct flights. I'm just going to get us this screen first, and then we'll start filling in the direct flights.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to our screen. Let me just go back here for a second. Do I not currently have anything in my database?
That's embarrassing.
No, maybe we deleted them all last time. All right, so I'm going to look inside main activity, and we'll just steal our on-click dealy flippy thing. So here's our on-item click listener. So we're going to need that for our screen that when we click on one of those airports. So right now, that guy here for time. And here's my airport list activity. Here's my airport list view. So we'll set his on-item click listener to all of this stuff, and then we'll do some things in here. So when we click on one of the rows inside of our airport list view, we want to, for right now, just create an intent that takes us to that other page. So we're going to say intent I is equal to new intent from this context, and it's going to lead us to, what did we call it, airport detail activity.class. Oh, remember we have our this trick here, so I give myself, I did not, so I need to give myself a instance of airport list activity, because remember inside of here are this keyword is an on item click listener. I actually need a activity. So I'm going to say private airport list activity, call that myself. So this dot myself is equal to this. It's actually kind of a funny looking line. So I'm going to set myself equal to the current version of this, so that in here I can just say myself. And then we'll say myself dot start activity I. And that should just get us to that screen, just to prove that we can get there. Then we'll make sure we pass the right stuff once we're there. All right, so we'll go to our airport list. We'll go ahead and let it populate. I'll go ahead and type in MKE, hit filter, click on this. That takes us to this new page that we made. But now we want this new page to probably show, like at the top, the whatever airport name we selected, and then underneath that have the list of all the direct flights. So let's go and design that screen a little bit. Now, for starters, what I'm going to try to get this guy to do is I'm going to say when I click on an airport here, it's going to take me to that second screen and show me the name of the airport I clicked in on top. So just to show I'm getting some information over there. All right. Then I'm going to need to play the game of getting the list of the direct flights. Lost. All right. So here is this guy. We'll make it much bigger font. And we'll bold it. And we'll center it. And we'll go ahead and give this guy a name. We'll call this guy Airport TV for text view. All right, so now we want to have that information passed over to this particular text view. So let me ask you this question. Well, first, let me prove that we can fill that in. So we'll go to the detail activity. I'll go ahead and give myself access to that here. So we're going to say we need a text view. And we have, this is called Airport TV. And this is equal to this dot find view by ID, r.id.airport TV. All right. And then I'll just say airport TV dot set text equal to LOL or something for right now, just proving that we are hooked up correctly to that guy. Okay, so there's our LOL, so that guy's hooked up right. So now what we want to have happen is when I click on one of these airports, I want that information to get sent to this other screen. Now, we are only actually sending it to one additional screen, so we might say we don't actually need to use the singleton to do this. Maybe we just pass it directly to keep our singleton somewhat clean. All right. Let's think about the ramifications of that. If I go to my airport list activity, right now these guys are being stored as airport objects, correct? And I think we saw last time that using put extras, if we have a custom object, it did not allow us to send it the way we wanted it to send. So if I want to have it select an entire airport, it probably makes sense for me to use my singleton, throw the entire airport up there so I have access to that entire airport object on the second screen. Even though we can make the argument that using the singleton for sharing information with one screen maybe isn't the best idea. So I'm going to come here into the singleton. We'll say public static airport. Current.
Since all you're after is the IATA code, I just pulled the substring out and used that and put extras to pass to the next activity.
You could certainly do that. It's possible we might want more than that on the next screen, but you're not wrong. we could just pass just the string across, since that would, let's just do that, since that fulfills what we need for the assignment.
Yeah, because you can pull the name out of that too, the IATA code. So you
Sure,
can set
sure.
the name up at the top with that, and then you can also get the code.
Right, so I can pass them as individual strings, or I can pass the entire airport object through the.
Well, you have that all serialized as a string in the list view. So if you just pass the list view string, that's what I did on the item click.
Oh, I see.
And I just grab that string, and then I put that and put extras, and then I grab it on the other screen and parse out what I need.
Oh, so you could separate it out so you get just what you need, or just the airport code?
Sure.
Yeah, you can do it that way. That's probably not a great solution to it.
It's fantastic.
Because I cannot figure that out.
If you already have it as an object, you might as well give it to yourself as an object. But our airport, so let me just show you what I'm getting at here. So our airport guy right now, it holds name, country, region, city, airport code. So airport code, that's the guy we actually want. Is that correct? The airport code? That's
what you want. And to be honest, I did that because I couldn't figure out how to, on my item click listener, I couldn't figure out how to find the object at the list view index.
That's exactly what I had too. I wasn't able to pass the object.
Yeah, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pass just this airport code as a string through extras.
Okay.
So you can see how that works.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, so let's do that, and then
that's why I parse strings. I was like, well, I know how to get the list view string, and I can just.
I got you.
So.
In core, what is our current airport selected?
It's going to be nothing.
It's no right now, but like, what is it supposed to be? Is that supposed to be the airport card or the airport
being
location?
Selected local. What are you talking about? Which I don't have any.
I thought that was something that we wrote in class.
I don't think so. We wrote current selected loyalty. I mean, I was about to write it. I was about to put a airport object here that was going to be our current selected airport, but now we're going to just pass the airport code as a string and only pass it as a full airport if and when we need more advanced stuff.
Okay.
So I'm going to come in here. When we select something, here's our linked list of airports, right? So I'm going to say airport, selected airport is equal to myself dot the airports dot get and the index of this guy was position. So I'll go ahead and grab the selected airport from my linked list of airports that belongs to myself from position whatever in that guy.
Do you mind logging that to the console on your first run? This is what I tried to do, but I couldn't get mine to work, and I used position, and I don't know what happened. I would always grab the wrong object.
Okay.
That's what I did too, actually.
So you're suggesting my code won't work.
Exactly.
I second that
pretty sure
motion.
I did that too.
Well, let me see if I'm willing to bet your grade on this.
I'll bet they're great on it.
Thanks, John.
I got you.
My filter button here. Yeah, the reason that won't work is because the way we do our filter strings. So our filter strings are what actually show up in there. So we clear out all those airport strings, but we do not clear out the airports. So what we would need to do is find the location of that filter string in the airport.
Or put the list view string into extras. Just joking. We'll carry on this way. I'm curious to learn how this would work.
Because like the filter string right now, before you enter anything, is technically the original string with no filter on it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, so understand how filters work right now.
Right.
When we hit the filter button, we dump our filter strings linked list, but we never, ever, ever change our list of all the airports. So our list of all the airports have a bunch of airport objects in them.
It's like 7,000,
Yeah,
and now
whatever
you
it
have
was.
5 in the airport string, so the indexes are never going to line
So
up.
what I'm actually going to do then is the quick fix for this is I'll just say private linked list of airport, the filtered airports. The new linked list. Of airport. All right, so then what I'll do, so I just gave myself, just like I have my airport strings, I have this dot, the filtered airports dot clear, and every single time I add something to the filtered strings, I'll say this dot, the filtered airports dot add a. So now my filter airports should mimic the airport strings. Which will then allow me to do the filtered airports dot get position. Then I dot put extra airport code selected airport dot, I guess I made it public or whatever, dot airport code. And then over on the receiving side, the detail screen, I'll get my airport code. Let's see that work first, and then I'll explain what I did there. There's our MKE. All right, so go back here to, is this where I was? Yep. All right, so the way we made our filter button work is we never emptied out our list of airports. We have 7 zillion airports, and we always keep those. But when they do a search and they filter, we manage this filtered airports list of strings. Now I'm just managing we managed the airport strings linked list. Now I'm managing a second linked list that keeps pointers to the airports that associate with those airport strings. So each time through, I clear both of those lists, and I fill both of those lists. I fill the airport strings up with just the string version of that guy, and I fill the filtered airports up with the actual airport.
Oh.
So now these guys are parallel linked lists. And I could have done that differently. That was just the quick and dirty way of doing it. But it was definitely way better than crazy parsing on the other side.
Yes, actually, it's much easier. So,
but you see the challenge now. You see why that was working the way it worked.
yeah, I totally get it. I had a linked list of like 7,000 or so
Yeah.
objects,
And you were
I
trying
was
to get
pull
buckets.
that index off of a list view with 5 objects, so the indices are never going to like correspond.
Okay, so we have that guy over there now. So now what I'm going to do is, where is my network thread? I'm just calling my network thread inside of main activity somewhere right now, right?
That's correct. In t.start, it's on create.
So the beginning, and we want to put that in the detail activity, right?
Oh my gosh, he even gave you this part? Killing me. Wait, hold on. Did I actually use that part in there? I have to wait to decide how much I'm killing me. Killing me. All right. Yeah, so I'm going to just dump this. We don't need to call it there. So now what we'll do is we'll go inside of airport detail activity, this guy. I'll paste that in here for a second. I'm going to say string airport code is equal to, I'll go ahead and grab the intent from this guy. All right, so I just threw it in a variable. That way I can use it again here in a second. Then let me look at my network thread here. And it should be fine. Now, one weird thing, though, if you saw the way it displayed, it has double quotes around it. I'm going to go ahead and remove those double quotes. Probably wouldn't hurt anything, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Sounds like crazy string parsing to me.
So did you write a function to do that?
No, I took substring indices. I said, okay, grab what's in between the first two instances of single quotes. That's my airport code.
Yep.
You're crazy.
That's just crazy, man.
It's crazy.
All right, so I'm going to say this.
But at least it
Airport
worked.
code is equal to airport code dot I think that'll do it. Stop playing Marco Polo. You know your assignment's just getting harder and harder. That gets it to shut up. They're playing Marco Polo in Slack. All right, so we'll have a special assignment just for Maddie, apparently. All right, so there's the thing with MKE off. So I actually use this replace all thing that looks for regular expressions. And so I said search for the double quote and replace it with nothing. But you could have just as easily written a little function in core or something like that to go and do that. So this just strips the from both ends of the airport code. Then we'll set the text. Then we'll start our network thread. But instead of passing it MKE, we'll pass it airport code. We'll tell that thread to start. We're going to have to give it a little bit more here in a second, but you'll see what we're doing. Let's just get it cooking right. So where's my network thread? Network thread is here. It gets the airport code. It sets the airport code. Inside of here, instead of MKE, we're going to say this dot airport code. Whatever airport code you passed in to your network thread, that's what we're going to concatenate onto this flights from. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. So now we'll be able to pick something other than Milwaukee, and we should see the direct flights for that. Put up my logcat here. Dump all this. So I'm going to do a search for ORD, which is Chicago. Apparently it's in there. Well, let's just do a search for Chicago then. Here's ORD right here. So there's ORD, and it's searching behind the scenes here, and we should see it pop up shortly. Make sure that guy actually gives us endpoint. So it should be ORD. Yeah, it does. It's taking it so long.
I wasn't sure if I was having latency issues. I'd have the same thing too, where it seemed like it'd freeze, and I was also getting errors in the exception block where well, maybe it worked just right there, but it would tell me something about trying to do things on the alternate thread that could only be done on the main thread.
Yeah, it looks like it's screaming about garbage collection stuff. They might be doing too much work on its main thread.
Yeah, I would get garbage collection errors, and then what I ended up trying to do, which I'm curious when we get there, is I tried to set the array adapter inside of network thread.
Yeah, I'm going
like that.
Oh, here they are. Oh, it just took a while for them to pop up.
Yeah, it's like a latency issue.
All right, so it worked.
Garbage collection issue. I'm not sure which.
Yeah, so it worked. It's fine. It just is going to be slow, but that's okay. It's slow the first time when it lists all of our airports. All right, so here's all the airports that go there. These are a bunch of strings. So what we're going to do is now we're going to set up a list view with a stock array adapter inside of our detail view so that it shows a bunch of these guys. So we'll set up a dummy one first just to make sure it's working. So where's my detail? So I'll go ahead and go to my legacy stuff here. We'll go to my list view, drop that guy in here. We're going to call this guy destinations LV. And then we'll give ourselves access to that inside of this code. Let's see. Do I want to have my detail array adapter? Well, I'm going to pass it in because that seems like it's more fun. So So we'll go ahead and set up this. We'll say this dot destinations LV is equal to this dot find view by ID r dot ID dot destinations LV. Then we're going to give ourselves an array adapter. Type string. Oh, that guy AA is going to be a new array adapter of type string, but then we need to give it a collection of strings. So temporarily, I'm going to give it a linked list. I did show you the built-in linked list last time, or did I say you had to use your own?
You let us use the built-in.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you deleted your own.
Oh, so this should work now? Yeah, it does. Okay. So we're going to create a linked list of strings. LL is a new linked list of strings. And I'm just going to go ahead and fill it up real quick with some just random airport names. I'd like it to be a, what's this guy take? Array. Oh, it wants me to give it a list type. Actually, when I do a linked list is a list. Yeah, it's a linked list. So I'm calling the constructor that takes in. Oh, I'm not giving it my row. This is on you, Mr. Gonzalez. This is r dot layout dot. Did we have like, was another row our basic one? I'll check it real quick. Just the row that has just the text label in it. Yeah, this guy just has a text view. So I'll pass it this context, I'll pass it another row, and I'll pass it my linked list. And then we will say this dot destination LV dot set adapter, set array adapter, set adapter, whatever it is. AA. Okay. So now that guy should have our airport 0, 1, 2, 3, blah, 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 whatever in it. All right, so there's those guys. All right, but now instead of it having those guys set in it, what we want to do is we want to have this linked list managed by our network guy. So I can set all these things up, but my linked list is not going to already have stuff in it. Instead, when I start my network thread, I want to pass it my array adapter and my linked list. I need the array adapter to tell it that it's updated. I need the linked list to change the data, but can I ask my array adapter for the list? Both. I'm going to pass this guy LL. I'm going to pass it AA. So my network thread is going to be expecting a linked list and an array adapter. So I'll go into network thread. And this guy's going to take a couple of new parameters. Private array adapter of strings. We'll call this guy the array adapter. And private linked list of strings. Call this the airport or the destination strings. The constructor for this guy will take 3 pieces of information: the code, the array adapter, and a linked list. We'll set those 3 things. This dot the array adapter is equal to the array adapter. This dot destination strings is equal to destination strings. So now we have access to those 2 guys. Now down here inside of our run, this is where we were actually printing out those substrings. These are the names of those guys. But now instead of printing them out, I'm going to say this dot, the destination strings, dot add that string, the string I just found. And then when I used to say done, now I'll say this dot array adapter dot notify dataset changed. All right, so initially our list should have nothing in it. Then this network thread is created. It knows the airport code it's searching for. It knows about the array adapter it's going to use. It knows about the linked list of strings that it's going to fill. Inside of run, it's going to do our network load. It's going to search through here, get all those destination names. Each time it finds one, rather than printing them out like it did before, it's just going to add that string to our linked list, however many that is. And then as soon as it's done, we tell our array adapter that your data set's changed. It will notify itself, which should update the list. Put the parameters in the other order. So this guy takes an airport code, an array adapter, and a linked list. Because this says it takes a airport code, an array adapter, and a linked list. So the theory is that should be it. I'll do it for Milwaukee first, since that was easier to find. There's Milwaukee. It's going to take a second. but it should eventually pop in there. How long was it taking on Ruth? Was it taking 20, 30 seconds?
For me, it was taking a minute or two even sometimes.
Really?
I feel like you should be seeing some more inside a log cat than what's
I
going on.
stopped printing stuff and I deleted it when I first came in there. Here, let me do this while we're at it. So I stopped printing it out in here. Go ahead and still print out done. So there's all the direct flights. That is shocking it takes that long. But it's your only option because they won't let us do network stuff on the main thread anyways. But it really is shocking it takes that long. So then so let's see, there's all the direct flights from Milwaukee. If I go back and I do a search for Chicago, and I find ORD, that's O'Hara. Probably need to make this the thread a higher priority to get it to run quicker, but it looks like it's working. Just we need to have lots of ads showing up on our screen so we get people clicking and making us zillions of dollars.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. While that's cooking, let me just search real quick and see if we can increase the priority of a Java thread. Yeah, let's just give this dude a max priority. That's the most important thing. Except part of the constructor, I have to set it afterwards. Set it afterwards. Yeah, because what's happening is Android has a whole bunch of threads running in the background, right? Anyways, now we have our own little thread running that is doing all this network crap, but it's just getting so little CPU time that it's taking forever for it to actually finish. So if we come into this guy, set priority, to thread dot max priority. Yeah. Now you're important. Let's just start it over. See if that. The rest of the application becomes unusable, but it loads really quick. Big money. It's not really any faster. At least not fast enough faster. All right, let's see. This is garbage collection stuff it's not happy about. Oh, this is the problem. So our view was created inside of.
That's the error I was getting today.
Yeah. So it's actually probably already has the data. We're just waiting for it to naturally refresh. Yeah. The data was there. We just have to get it to naturally refresh because the problem we're running into here is this guy. So it's not a thread priority issue. It is here inside of network thread. This guy, when he notified data set change, it's trying to change that list view, right? And that list view is owned by the main thread, not this thread. So we're going to say, this is the solution to the homework. It's just slow. So now I want to tell a thread to do something else. Let's see. How do we? Can't tell it directly there.
Are you saying that it's notifying the main thread and not the network thread? Is that correct?
No, the main thread is the guy who owns that list view. Okay, so the main thread owns the list view. Therefore, when we go to update that list view, it has to be updated from the main thread.
Why don't we put our list view in the network thread?
We would have to put the whole activity in the network thread because it's actually the activity that owns the.
What if you?
Let's see. Looks like I can do this. Let me just try this real quick. Then if it works, I'll explain what's going on. So this is the same thing as we've had before. So I need to say myself dot the array adapter. Let's see if this fixes it, and then I'll explain what I'm doing. So this has everything to do with how Android updates its interfaces and nothing to do with the logic behind the scene. Okay, that was faster. Because it popped up there as soon as it said done, right here. So let me test it on Chicago. As soon as we see done populate in here, I expect it will show up. Yeah, see, it's saying it's suspending threads. So right now our thing's not even working in the background. We have to wait till it gets CPU time again. What I really want to do is I want to run this network code on the main thread. It'll run fast then. Let me just do a search here. I know it's the UI thread. I want the UI to update faster. Well, there's where it said done, and it did update. That's just too slow. Let me see if there's anything I can do to speed this up. So we can do it with an async task. I don't know if that's going to be any faster. So an async task should be a implementation of a thread. I don't think it's going to be any faster. Oh, maybe it will be. Because this is actually something from Android, not something specifically from Java. Threads are just Java things. So let's try this as an async task. So we'll call this the slow solution to the homework. So let me implement an async task version of this guy. There's not much to change. Okay. Let me steal this here. Well, actually, I'll just write it fresh. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new Java class. We're going to call this guy airport destination task. And this guy, instead of extending thread, he's going to extend an async task. And the parameters he's going to take are, we need him to take in a string. We need him to take in a array adapter. I guess we still need. And a linked list. Array adapter of strings and a linked list of strings. Yeah, see, it's a helper class around thread and handler. It's not going to be any faster.
Have you tried pouring coffee on the computer? The caffeine helps.
Is that it? I really wonder why that network stuff would be so slow. Well, it's actually not the networking. It's not that the networking stuff is slow. It's that updating the interface is slow. Oh, you know what? We could do this. Here, let me try something here. I'm not even gonna do this async thing. I'm pretty positive it's not gonna work. It's just a wrapper for threads. But we go into our network thread here.
There's a question in the chat box.
Yeah, we're already implementing parallel processing. So using a thread, and that's actually the problem. Right now, what we've designed, so let me just draw a picture so you see what the holdup is. Right now, we have the main thread. And we can think of this as all of our interface. Then we have our network thread. This is get airports. Now this is a guy we made. It has much lower priority than the main thread. Now we have a list view. A list view that's here on the main thread that we want to update. And we have our data that's here on the secondary thread. The issue is that this network thread, because it's low priority, is able to get this data slowly. It's not getting full CPU time to get that data. So then once it has that data, it has to process it. It then has to wait till it's completely done processing it before it can go over here and talk to this guy and tell him to update his list view. Because this guy gets like 99% of the CPU time. And this dude just gets a word in edgewise every now and then. But I want to test something here real quick. This should tell us if this will fix it easily. I'm going to, well, I can leave that in there for right now. I want to know if I have my data very quickly, and then it's just taking time to process it because of the time we're getting on the CPU. So if we see have data come back pretty quick, then what we can do is we can force everything else inside of the main thread, just not the network communication portion, because just this is the network communication portion. Yeah, it does not have it quickly. That actually seemed to happen fairly fast, didn't it? But you saw the difference between have data and done. They happened pretty much instantaneously. So that means the logic here in the middle was quick. So that moved a lot more quickly. Because Chicago has a lot more data. I guess we can go back to giving it maximum priority as well. That's certainly not going to hurt. It just didn't seem to help that much.
Do you need to close off the connection that the URL object opens, like when we're done reading?
You probably should, but you don't actually have to, because it's when you hit the end of this run method, it'll close off on its own. But you're right. You probably should say input.close here.
Well, does the URL or searching for that, does that have to do with the main activity? Because if that's, never mind, I'm not.
I took that out of main activity. That's just our network thread.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So the issue here is that the code I have highlighted right now, that's taking too long. It's just that. Me going out and hitting that website and pulling the data back in takes too long, because it's taking longer than the amount of CPU time that the main thread is giving this thread to do that search. Logically, the fix for that would be increasing the thread priority.
Well, isn't that a downside of maybe screen scraping?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, but it shouldn't be this slow. I mean, this feels really slow, just like it's just not getting enough CPU time, and maybe it would be a lot faster on a physical device. I've actually seen that pretty often, you know, that the emulator just doesn't simulate it real well when you're doing networking stuff. In fact, let me try this real quick, and then we can maybe take a quick break, and I'll try it on my device. In fact, let me just try to set the priority higher.
Would it run quicker too if you were trying it in something like Eclipse? Of course, you can't do all the cool Java or.
Oh yeah. I mean, the slowdown here is the fact that the Android uses the main thread for handling its views.
Yeah. So you wouldn't, if you're doing network communication in like an Eclipse Java application, it wouldn't necessarily make you spin up another thread.
No, not at all. 100% you can do it on the main thread. Yeah, see, that's not horrible, but it's not great. But I guess punchline is it technically works. So why don't we just expect it to be sluggish for now? I'll try to come up with a solution for you for next week on how to make it faster for loading data, but it does load the data. So what we want to do for next week is take this one step farther, where now you can click on any one of these and it takes you to that airport to see what the destination flights are there. So you can kind of build your travel hacks. You can say, okay, well, I'm starting in Milwaukee and I want to go to Atlanta. I'm going to spend 3 days in Atlanta. So you click on Atlanta, and then it's going to show you all of the places you can go to direct from Atlanta. So it'll kind of reload this page for the airport you just clicked on. Does that make sense? And then you should be able, from this page, you should be able to keep doing that where you can just dig down and kind of build a trip and say, I'm going to go from Milwaukee to Atlanta. And, you know, Atlanta would give you, if you clicked on Atlanta there, it should give you this is going to be bigger than Chicago, but a big list of places you can go to direct from Atlanta. Then if you click on that, it'll show you a big list of places you can go from that airport. So you can just keep drilling down, and just, you know, kind of build a trip in segments if you want. Kind of makes sense what I'm asking you to do? We kind of draw a picture. And then we'll just, once I get this out, we'll just be done for the night. I think my throat's had what it can take. But before I go to bed, I'll test on my device to see if it is faster. But right now, what we have is we have a screen that lists all airports. And that screen, when you click on something, takes you to destination airports, direct flights. Does this. What I wanted to do now is when you click on something on this screen, it goes back and grabs the airport from this screen and reloads this screen. So if I clicked on Milwaukee here, it's going to list me all the Milwaukee airports right here. Then if I click on Atlanta, it should go back to this screen. Well, not necessarily back to the screen, but back to this data, load up Atlanta, and then reload this screen for Atlanta. So I should be able to use this as a tool to kind of build a trip that says I can go from this place to this place to this place to this place. Make sense what I'm saying?
Do we need a way to remember where you're going?
You're not really asking for a destination. You're really just saying, you know, I'm going to start by flying to Milwaukee. Then, I'm going to say I'm going to start at Milwaukee. Then I'm going to fly to Atlanta. From Atlanta, I can go to all these places. Now I'm going to click on this. I'm going to go to Dallas. You know, so just over and over and over. You don't need to be able to backtrack. At any point in time, you should just be able to dig down into it. You don't have to be able to show all the places you were going to go. We're going to kind of do that next. But this is just a matter of doing something from this screen. This screen's going to show me all the places. So in our original search here, Milwaukee, this screen's going to show me all of the places I can go to from Milwaukee. When I pick one of these places, I want this screen to effectively reload with all the places I can go to from that airport. So if I were to click on Atlanta, this screen should then reload with that type of thing. So your core data got loaded here. You have all your airports. But then you should be able to kind of jump from airport to airport to airport, finding out where each one goes. Almost like building a magical trip. We won't keep track of all those hops yet, but we want to be able to do that next step of allowing you to click on something on this screen and remember, this screen is showing me a list of destination airports as just strings.
So basically, you want to change the airport code each time.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so the list of strings here is the name of it and then the airport code. So I want to be able to update the airport code on this and show the next list of destinations based on what I clicked on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, so any questions you have for me? I'll take our current code and I will commit it. All right, so it is now up there. And I'll put the assignment up here in a few minutes. I should get the exams graded, I would think, tomorrow sometime. I'll get those out there. But like I said, remember, you can do, if you do better on the final than you did on the midterm, I'll replace your midterm grade with whatever you got in your final. And I will put Bible homework up for this week, so I'll put that up actually here in a few minutes as well. All right, questions, comments, concerns, bribes? All right. Well, I will see everybody hopefully in person next Tuesday.
Night.